girl. Everybody, Crafting Journey here, that journey chick over on Instagram, and you are watching Crafting and Crime Daily on Friday. And you know what that means? Everybody out of your chair. Yep. Friday dance, ooh, ooh, Friday dance. Yep, that's it. That's all you got. All right, that's my exercise for the day. So, this is a continuation of yesterday. Did I start the gnome crochet along? I did. It's not really a crochet along because it already happened last year. So I'm just doing it. So where's my first attempt? Okay, here was my first attempt. Which, nothing wrong with this attempt. Except when I called my friend Mickey, she's like, isn't that supposed to be blue? That's not, why is that white? I'm like, what do you mean, why is it white? That's the border. So I look at the pattern. I screwed up. The border is light blue. Okay. So and frogging this thing out because stops and starts. Like, this is not the same bobbin as this. And so I just said, let's just start over. Yeah. So here we are. And I am actually, look, it's starting to come together. Wait a minute, which way does it go? Hold on. Yeah, like this. Yeah. So I'm actually I'm getting ready to do the last increase row, and then I'm going to start decreasing. So I'm like halfway done with the first square. How cool is that? Yes, I went and bought yarn. So rather than do like I didn't have any idea how to do the bobbins. So I've got all my colors here. These are the 4 colors. Well, it's actually 5 because here's the nose. So what I did for the bobbins is I got out my yarn winder. Here it is. And I will get to the Murdaugh case, honestly. I really will. But first, the crafting part. So I used my yarn winder and I created what I'm calling the bobbins. So I created bobbins for each color. And yeah, it's working for me. I looked on Amazon like for bobbins, yarn bobbins, and there's some out there, but then you gotta wind them by hand, and I thought, no, we're gonna use the yarn winder. It's much easier. So the only thing I'm noticing is that I'm spending a lot of time, and maybe I'll spend less time as I get used to doing this, is I'm being very careful as to, just as I go, sew in the ends, because there's a lot of ends because you're stopping and starting and stopping and starting. So I got to an area where, let me go get to the back again, where I am just, and like see, you can see I'm still attached to some of the bobbins. So I'm at a point where I can just, my next 9 squares going down this way are all white, so I don't have to change color while I talk to you about the Alex Murdaugh trial. Oh my God, guys. Wow, just wow. I don't want to lose this, so I'm just going to set that over there. This is the darning needle that I'm using. These were given to me by a subscriber. And oh my God, I love these things. I have a whole bunch of them. I'll just put this in here so I don't lose it. Different colors. One of the best things I've ever gotten. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so Yesterday, wow, was not a good day for Alex Murdaugh. The day started out with the judge telling the defense, you opened the door to the financial crimes. And they're like, no, we didn't. Yes, you did. And here's how that was done. Let me get to the beginning here. Oh my goodness. On the day before, when they were cross-examining the two friends of Paul, Rogan Gibson and Will Loving, they asked him, is there any conceivable reason you can think of why Alex Murdaugh would want to commit these crimes? You know, wasn't he a kind, loving father? So by those questions, they were asking about Alex's character. Now, typically you cannot bring in character evidence if you're doing it like character evidence of prior crimes. If you're doing it to show that he had a propensity for these type of crimes and that he acted in conformity with, you know, the other crimes that he, you know, but this is not even related to those other crimes. However, it can come in to show motive. Yes, and the judge articulated it. He spent a lot of time citing case law that he was relying on and articulating this very well. And when the defense tried to argue, it all has to do with this, you know, rules of evidence 404B, which I'm not going to get into that whole thing. I'd have to put you through a whole law school class on evidence. He shut the defense lawyers down right then. You know, he says, I'm not even deciding this on 404Bs. He was deciding it on 403, or which was some others. I'm like, oh my God, I don't even going to look these up. I mean, I know what 404B is, and that's the one I just told you about, action in conformity, and, you know. So the judge said, however, I'm not going to make my final ruling until I have an in-camera hearing for each witness that's going to be brought in, because I want to hear what they're going to say about these financials. Now, keep in mind, the judge is supposed to be neutral. He's probably, you know, he's not really supposed to be looking this up, but I mean, this is a very small town. I don't think he's from this area. He was brought in just for this trial. So he may not know a lot about Alex's financial stuff. So the first person they brought in, and what they did was because it was early in the day, they excused he brought the jury in. And did they hear from any witnesses at all? I don't know. No, I don't think so. So he sent them out. He says, we've got some legal stuff to deal with. I'm going to send you out, and I want you to come back after lunch. So they basically got the morning off. So then the first person, now we're no longer in a trial. We're in a hearing. This is an in-camera, they call it in-camera, where the judge listens to what this witness's testimony is going to be, and then typically will make a ruling as to whether he's going to allow this witness to testify to whatever it is they just said. But he says he's going to hold off until he hears it all. So the first witness is Jeannie Seckinger. She is the chief financial officer for PMPED. Now, let me tell you what that stands for. That is Peters, Murdaugh, Parker, Eltsroth, and Dietrich. And it's known locally as PMPED. However, after this whole financial thing went down, they did not want anything to do with Alex Murdaugh, so they changed their name to the Parker Law Group. So here's what she said went down regarding Alex Murdaugh, and it was very lengthy testimony. So if I lose you, I am so sorry. Just ask questions. I always answer my comments. So she explained that partners, the way they work, the law firm, is that partners are actually employees of the law firm, and they're paid a base salary. Now, that base salary is usually $125,000, but they all, at the end of the year, get a huge bonus based on fees that they brought into the law firm. And I didn't understand how she said it was, they add up the fees, all the fees, because anytime you get a fee from any case you work on, and she explained that you cannot work on cases independently and get your own fees. If you're an employee, all the work you do is on behalf of the law firm. You cannot go outside and do outside cases. So all the fees that any partner brings in goes into this one account. And at the end of the year, they add them all up, they subtract the overhead of the firm, and then they divide it up somehow. And it's quite lucrative. She said there were many times where Alex made 7 figures. Yep, we're talking million a year. Million plus, yeah. So, where was I? Okay. So she started to explain this whole Chris Wilson thing. Now, Chris Wilson, we're going to hear from later on, and I'm going to tell you about his testimony, but he was a friend of Alex Murdaugh's. Oh, before I get to that, Jeannie's Seconder knew Alex all the way from back in high school, as well as Chris Wilson. This is how small this town is, Hampton County. They all went to Hampton County, whatever the high school is. So Jeannie knew Alex Murdaugh since, they were teenagers. Chris knew Alex Murdaugh since they were teenagers. Anyway, Chris and Alex by this point are best friends. I don't think they were in high school, but by this point, they're best friends. And Chris, and I'm actually just going to combine the testimony because it's just easier that way, because they're both talking about this one case, and the case is called the Ferris case. Now, the Ferris case was a case against Mack trucks for a very bad accident that they got into. There was something wrong with the brakes, and Chris gets a call from another local attorney. So by now, they've gone. Chris went to high school with him. They went to law school together, and Chris has his own law practice. But because, he's a small-time guy, if he gets a big case, he teams up with somebody from PMPED, and usually it's Alex because that's the guy that he knows, and they work the case together. And the reason lawyers do that is because when you're a solo practitioner, it's very expensive to try, especially a products liability case. They were going after the brake manufacturer or whatever it was for his Mack truck accident. And so, Chris Wilson gets this call from this local attorney, and he says, I'm doing the personal injury part. Could you handle this products liability? He says, yes. He calls Alex. And going back to the reason they do that is because it's very expensive, and Alex's firm can afford to front those expenses, whereas a solo practitioner, not so much. So they work together. And as each firm incurs fees, they're paid. So depending on just who gets the bill. But they agree up front on how they're going to split the fees. And in this case, in the Ferris case, they agreed to split the fees 50-50. So in January of 2021, they have a trial, a bench trial for this Mack truck related, they call it Ferris, accident. And there were 2 plaintiffs, the injured party and his wife, for loss of consortium, which means loss of love and affection and companionship and, mowing the lawn and all that good stuff. So they do the trial. It's in front of a judge, and they had already agreed that defendant had already, in that case, whoever manufactured the brakes or whatever, had admitted liability. So it was just a trial on damages that were incurred. So I don't know what this guy's injuries were, but they must have been really, really bad, because the judge, and they agreed nobody would appeal. They would just agree with the decision and nobody would appeal. And that way the injured party gets their money faster. So it was heard in front of a judge. Alex did the closing argument, and the judge comes back and awards $5 million to the injured party and $1.5 million to the wife for loss of consortium. So is that right? $6.5 million. So now the way they disperse fees is whoever gets the settlement check does the disbursement. But in this case, Chris Wilson said, I like to do the disbursements because, I'm the one that signed these clients up, and I want to make sure that if they ever have any questions, the questions will come to me. So I usually ask for the disbursement check to come to me. So that's what he did in this case. So he gets the check and he does the disbursement. And by disbursement means they pay the clients their money, they pay the attorney's fees to the attorney, whatever other attorney was in the case. And in this case, Alex earned $762,000 in fees. Chris Wilson earned $761,000, and then there was an amount to that third attorney that referred it to the two of them. So Alex asked his friend Chris Wilson, he said, listen, can you make out the check to me personally, because I'm going to put this into an annuity. And it was going to be two checks, because he says, I want it to, instead of 762, could you send me what was the split? 600. Send me a check for 600,000 and send me one for 162,000, and I'm going to put those in an annuity. My firm already knows that I'm going to do this, and they've said it's okay, and they're going to put the fees down on the books, and it's all. I've already ran it by them, and everything's fine. Well, so several months later, Jeannie says she knew that they were owed a $762,000 fee, and she'd never seen it. She's the chief financial officer. So she goes to Alex's paralegal, and she says, actually, Alex's paralegal goes to her and says, we got these checks, and they were made payable to Alex for the fees in this case. Is that the way is that okay? Or are we supposed to do that this way? So she starts investigating, and the way she and the partners, she goes to the partners, and they said, well, just, ask Alex about it. And Alex comes in the day after she was asking about these fees, and she says, because Alex's paralegal messages Chris's paralegal and says, we didn't get the check for the fees. And she says, all right, let me start over. Okay. So total of $762,000 in fees that Alex has asked to be paid in two separate checks. So Chris Wilson makes the checks out to Alex. Alex takes those checks to the Bank of America. He endorses them, and then deposits them in a bank account called Forge, doing business as Forge. It's Alex Murdaugh, doing business as Forge. Now, Forge is a large annuity company, and it's actually called Forge Consulting. We'll get to that later on. So Jeannie Seconder, the CFO, she goes to Alex's paralegal one day, and she says, where is that $762,000 check? And Jeannie says, well, we haven't gotten it yet. It's being held by Chris Wilson. So she says, well, can you check on that? So she messages Chris's paralegal, and Chris's paralegal types her back and says, everybody was paid. 762, your fee check was sent to Alex. So at this point, red flags are going off over at PMPED. So Jeannie Seconder, she's trying to figure out what she's going to do. And the next morning, Alex somehow finds out about it, maybe from his paralegal. And Jeannie she approaches Alex and he's like, what do you want? She goes, I think we need to talk. So she goes in his office, they close the doors. She goes, where is this $762,000 check? I think it was paid to you directly, and that's not how we do things. Where's the checks? And he says, oh, Chris Wilson has them, he's holding them. So at this point, she believes him, but she still suspects that he's done something with that money. But at this point, he gets a phone call. And the phone call is about his dad being very, very ill and hospitalized. So Jeannie just drops the subject and leaves and says, okay, we're not going to deal with this right now. And she thinks that he's left for the day to go see his dad. And at 4 o'clock, she gets a phone call from him asking, what is my 401k balance? And she's like, why do you want to know that? And he says, because he's working on financials that were due in the boat accident. Okay, now she says this is the second time he's asked her that question. And this is around 4 o'clock. Now this is all on the day of the murders. This confrontation that she goes into his office, she confronts him about the $762,000. That is all on the day of the murder. Now, 4 o'clock, he calls her about this 401k balance. And she said she was quite surprised because I thought he had left to go to the hospital to see his dad. No. And we learn later on that he goes home and meets up with Paul. They drive around the property. So it's not, so then the murders happen, the firm basically shuts down for the week, and they don't want to really confront Paul or Alex because of this horrible, murders that have occurred. They don't get back to the subject until September. So in September, they, again, they still haven't got the $762,000. So now they're confronting Alex again. So Alex calls over to Chris Wilson and he said, listen, I made a mistake. The annuities, I didn't set them up right, and I need to send the money back to you so you can put it in your trust account, and then disperse it a different way. So he sends Chris Wilson a check for $600,000. So Chris is like, where's the other $162,000? He goes like, I don't have it right now. It's tied up in the annuity. And, he says they were both set up differently, but this one, I can't touch the 162 right now because it's part of the annuity, and so I'm trying to do some other things to put the money together to get it over to you. So Chris is like, I'll loan it to you. I know you're good for it. So he loans him the 162,000. So now the 762,000 is back in the trust of Chris Wilson. Okay. So by now, in September, the law firm is putting 2 and 2 together. They contact, because they figure out that there's been all these settlements where they don't have the fees. And Alex is saying, well, it's all tied up in the forge, as part of an annuity. So they send a list of clients' names over to, and the guy's name is, he testified too, Michael Gunn with Forge Consulting, who says he did receive the list from PMPED, and he says we didn't have accounts set up for any of those people, that Alex actually created a fake Forge account at Bank of America. Michael Gunn said, we haven't dealt with Bank of America in years. So Alex was endorsing these fee checks in multiple cases and depositing them for his own benefit into this Bank of America account that was in his name. And to the tune of, by the time what they did was they PMPED fired, well, they asked Alex to resign, and he resigned. And then they notified law enforcement, and they had a forensic audit. So they ended up having to pay back, because he was taking his client money too. He would put the client's money into this forge accounts as well. And he had been doing it since August of 2015. And it added up that they ended up having to pay back clients $2,841,512.55 that they had to pay back the clients. Then there was the Hakeem Pinckney case, which I covered. They ended up having to pay that family back $1,325,000. And Hakeem Pinckney, oh, such a sad, sad case. He was paralyzed from the neck down from this accident. He was like a college football player. He got into this horrible accident, ends up paralyzed from the neck down, ends up in this nursing home. And after his case is settled, which his mother never saw any money from until, later on, his respirator, because he was on a respirator, couldn't breathe on his own, gets mysteriously unplugged, and he passes away. Then I think there was a wrongful death suit against the nursing home. I don't know. So that's a whole other issue. So where was I in this fee thing? Okay. So the firm ends up having to pay all of this back. Then we get to Chris Wilson. Now we're in this, it's September 2nd that they ask Alex to resign. On September 3rd, Chris Wilson gets a call. He said he was out with some other people, and he gets a call from Lee Cope, who's one of the partners at PMPED, and he tells Chris Wilson, listen, I need you to know, because you work closely with Alex, that we've identified that he has stolen a large amount of fees and settlement checks from clients. Because they also, in addition to these forge schemes, they discovered another category of schemes that Alex was pulling off with the help of Palmetto State Bank that go back all the way to 2008. Now, he was working with Russell Lafitte at Palmetto State Bank to pull off these schemes, and we already know that Russell Lafitte was found guilty in federal court of wire fraud and all these federal charges related to this little scheme that they had going. So PMPED also discovered that. So Lee tells Chris Wilson this, and he said, I just need you to know this. So he said it hit him like a Mack truck. He just, literally Mack truck, no pun intended. He said his first response was, he tried to call Alex. He says Alex didn't call him back till the next day. And he calls him back and he says, I need to talk to you in person. Because Alex was like, I can't talk right now. And he's like, well, I got something I need to talk to you about, and I want to do it in person. So they agreed to meet over at Alameda, which is Alex's parents' house. They go over there. His mom's there, the caretaker's there, and they're out talking on the front porch. And he's like, Alex, whoa, what the F? What's going on here? And Alex says, listen, I need you to know that Alex starts crying, bawling. He had to stop. He had to go in, get some Kleenex, comes back out. He says, listen, I've had a drug problem for over 20 years, opioids. And I've been stealing money. And he said that he shit me up. I shit you up. I shit a lot of people up. I guess that's how they talk. I don't know. And Chris says he was like, he couldn't even see straight. He was so mad. So he just leaves. And then he goes to Arby's, you know, because lunchtime now. He gets himself a sandwich. He stops over at his office to check on some things. And at this point, he gets a call from the PMPED law firm that Alex has been shot in the head. So he's thinking, Alex tried to kill himself. Well, the whole shot in the head thing is this fake suicide thing that Alex set up, where he's on the side of the road and has a pretend flat tire, and someone stops and shoots him in the head. Well, he had actually hired someone to kill him so that his son Buster could get his $10 million life insurance policy. Well, I don't know, something happened, and as it turns out, he was just like grazed in the head, not really, you know, and there were claims that he was helicoptered to a certain medical center, but his injuries were like minimal. He spends one night there, he's released the next day, and with his attorneys, and that's when he checks himself into the rehab for the drug. Yeah. And it goes on and on and on. Yeah. Wow, that's a lot. If you want to rewind and try to get that again, I know it was a lot. So we still don't know if the judge is going to let the jury hear all of this information. We don't know. So the jury did get to hear from a gentleman named Dylan Hightower, who's an investigator with the state attorney's office, who he said, you know, I know Alex because Alex was a volunteer solicitor. In other words, if they had a case where there was a conflict or something, they could bring in Alex and he would prosecute the case. So he says this investigator responds to like 95% of all, you know, murders that happen. And he responded to this one, I think, the next day. And he does some drone footage and he takes some photographs. And he says, you know, why don't we try to find Maggie's phone through Find My iPhone? He says, let's check with some of the family members. They may have this set up because they're all so close. And sure enough, John Marvin had Maggie's phone set up under Find My iPhone. So he actually uses the Find My iPhone and goes out and recovers the cell phone, which was about a half mile down Moselle Road, a half mile past the 1,700 acre property where it was found, on the side of the Moselle Road. And when he looked at the phone, I guess someone told him how to open it. He gave him the passcode to open it. When he looked at the phone, there were 2 phone calls recorded for that day, 2 phone calls showing up on the physical phone. When they got the Verizon records, there were 73 phone calls actually made that day, either to or from her phone. Yep. All right, guys. So I know that was a lot. Where's my calendar? Where's the calendar? I don't even know where the calendar. Oh, here it is. Oh my God. Yes. Let's do the Friday calendar, February 3rd. Okay. On February 3rd, 1780, a mass murder in Connecticut became one of the most famous crimes in recently independent United States and forever changed the way the country saw violent crime. 1780. Revolutionary War veteran Barnett Davenport beat to death 3 members of the family he was boarding with, the Mallorys. The attack was seemingly unprovoked, though there had been speculation it may have been a result of what would be labeled as untreated post-traumatic stress disorder from Davenport's years in the military. That sounds reasonable. PTSD. The fledgling media struggled to cover the crime. Up to that point, murderers were viewed as common sinners who had strayed far from the path of righteousness, but the press seemed so shocked by the suddenness and brutality of the crime that they portrayed Davenport as an evil outcast lacking the typical mores of society at large. Some say this view of violent crime persists in the U.S. today. I'm not sure I disagree. Yeah. And that's all I'm going to say about that. Yeah. Okay, guys. I'm going to continue. I'm going to try to finish this up this weekend. So we have January's no, and then I'm going to put it all away. and get ready for February's gnome, which I will work on probably the first week of March. Yeah, this is the first week of February. I'm doing the January gnome. First week of March, I'm going to work on the February gnome. Usually I do puzzles here on Friday. My sister and I are working on a puzzle. It is the Game of Thrones puzzle, but it's out on the dining room table. I've already done the border. It's not as easy as last week's puzzle. Not at all. It's proving to be a little bit more challenging than we thought. I thought, oh, this is going to be easy. Red, blue, white. How hard could it be? There's maps, you know. It's a challenge. And we love a challenge, don't we? Okay, guys. Have a great weekend. I will be live on Sunday, 11 a.m. I hope you guys can join me. We just chit-chat, talk about our week, answer any questions you might have on the trials that I covered during the week. And I hope to see you there. Everybody take care. Bye.